It's Bullseye. I'm Jesse Thorn. So Romesh Ranganathan knows that you probably haven't heard of him. In the UK, though, he's a legit celebrity. He's a stand-up comedian. He's also been a regular on some national shows there for a few years now, including spin-offs of The Apprentice and The Great British Bake Off. He also hosted a travel show called Asian Provocateur. In it, he travels around the world reconnecting with his parents' home country of Sri Lanka. The second season features his mom throughout the entire thing. It's very funny. And now he's giving American stardom a shot. And he's doing it in a really strange, kind of crazy way. He's just moved out here with his wife, his kids, his mom, and everything. And he's going to make his big debut an enormous debut. He rented out the Greek Theater in Los Angeles. This is a 6,000-seat theater. This is the kind of theater where a band plays it and they make a theatrical film there. This is like Yanni live at the Acropolis or something. The show is Thursday, December 21st. I'm probably not exaggerating when I say that Romesh is a little bit terrified. When we first heard about this in November, he had sold, wait for it, 74 of the 6,000 seats. If you can make it out, though, you're in for a treat. Let's take a listen to a little bit of Romesh Ranganathan's stand-up. You'll hear what I'm talking about. In this clip, he's talking about his mom.
She is a wonderful woman, my mother, but she... Okay. She doesn't actually consider me to be a proper Asian. This is the sad state of affairs in my life. My mum calls me a coconut. I don't know if you've heard this term. Don't applaud it. Brown on the outside, white on the inside. So my mum calls me, you're coconut. And the reason my mum calls me a coconut is because originally Sri Lankan, my mother tongue is Tamil, and I cannot speak it. And the reason I cannot speak it is because my mum and dad never spoke it to me when I was growing up, and now my mum blames me for not being able to speak it. So she'd come up to me and she'd go, "Ba-da-da-da-da," and I say, "I don't know what you're on about." Right? And then she'd go, "Why don't you know?" Right? Because there's no Rosetta Stone Tamil.
Romesh Ranganathan, welcome to Bullseye. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Jesse. I appreciate it.
So tell me about this scheme that you've hatched here in the United States. I gather you have rented a theater despite the absence of a local fan base.
Yeah, that's sort of the idea. Is sort of I've basically hired out the Greek, and I'm performing there on the 21st of December, but I don't have any profile here. So I just thought, so I've been here for a while, and I just thought I'm just gonna take a run at it and see how I get on. Is sort of the idea. I don't know why the idea sort of came from, like, the whole thing of setting yourself a goal or a big target or something like that, and then see what happens. But what has happened is it's become clear it's too big.
I mean, are you famous to Sri Lankan Americans at all? There are comics who can connect with an affinity group that is transnational, and they can go and perform anywhere that there are those people, you know?
Yeah, I don't believe that's in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
I do know that my mum went to a Sri Lankan restaurant recently, just down the road from us, and they did say, "Oh, you're coconuts, Mum," but so
that's not necessarily.
But what they did not say is, "We are going to buy 5,000 tickets to the Greek." so yeah.
It seems like your relationship with your mom is a driving force in your work. You actually made an entire television program with your mom in the UK.
Yes. Well, we sort of my mum has always but the thing was, is a production company had approached me about doing a travel show, and the travel shows, you know, like comedians doing travel shows is not a new thing, but what I thought...
I mean, like, you could be the next Michael Palin, right?
Yes, exactly. Right, yeah.
Around the world in 80 days.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love that?
Exactly. But the thing is that I found that the ones that I enjoyed were the ones that it felt like there was a point to what they were doing, or there was a reason that you're watching them do these things. And at that time, my whole life, my mum has complained about the fact that I don't know anything about my heritage. My brother and I both don't, and that's partly because they were so determined that we be westernised, that they wanted us to have like as close to an English upbringing as they could give us, you know. And so, but then once I had children, my mum sort of became worried that the children were not going to know anything about their sort of lineage or whatever. And so that had been something that she'd always complained about. So we thought it was a good starting point for a show. Do you know what I mean? And it gave everything a reason. So that was kind of where it came from.
Why do you think your parents, when you were growing up, wanted you to be so English as first-generation immigrants themselves?
I think they would because part of the reason they went over to England was because they wanted their children to have a better start, and they thought it was a good thing to do. They wanted us to be educated in England and have good lives, I suppose, whatever that means. And so what they didn't want then, I guess they got worried that we were going to be seen as different or whatever, and that would mean that we'd have a worse time at school, or we'd struggle to get certain opportunities as we got older and stuff. And like, I think my mum sort of now, my dad's no longer with us, but my mum, when she sort of talks about it now, she does regret that, I think, to a degree, because if you're being taught about your culture and your language when you're a kid, you just soak it all up. But now I don't want to hear that. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I do, but I don't have that sort of. I'm not like a sponge anymore. Do you know what I mean? I'm a person that doesn't even want to make new friends. Do you know what I mean? Let alone take on all those kind of things. So
I barely want to leave the house.
Exactly.
And we're about the same age.
Exactly. So you're sort of like, it's just I'm not into this. And then my mum and I had a bit of an argument because she wanted to teach our children Tamil. And then really what I should have said was, yes, that sounds great. And I could still say that. But something about them being able to converse in a language that I don't understand or speak just felt like there were too many opportunities there for her to sort of organise some sort of coup.
Yeah, your concern is that they'd be plotting against you.
Exactly. So I was like, no. So I basically made my children more ignorant as a result of my own paranoia. Do you know what I mean?
What was your relationship like when you were old enough to be self-aware but not old enough to be a grown-up to your own Sri Lankan-ness? I mean, was it just something that you resented, an inconvenience in your life?
I wouldn't say it was an inconvenience. I mean, my parents didn't sort of immerse me in it. But then I remember, like, when my dad passed away, like 6 years ago, I remember being at his funeral and not really understanding what the ceremony was and the language that was being spoken at it. And I was sort of thinking, this is my own dad's funeral that I just sort of don't get. Do you know what I mean? Like, certainly the religious and Sri Lankan part of it. So those things you sort of feel sad about. And that was actually, part of the reason of me going to Sri Lanka as part of the show.
Had you ever been before?
I'd been like twice before. Once when I was like a baby, and then once when I was like 8 years old. I had to. My grandmother passed away, and the next male down in the family has to perform the funeral ritual or whatever. So I went over there to perform a ceremony. I had no idea. I just didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was just sort of guided and directed to do this thing. But I don't have. I mean, I remember my mum's still got a house there, so I remember that a little bit. But I didn't really have any. I didn't know anything about it really. So when I went back, it really was. I mean, I recognised my mum's house and the food, and that was about it really. And also, my mum and dad were very, and again, not exclusive to Sri Lankan culture by any stretch of the imagination, but like the hospitality element of welcoming people into your home and feeding them and stuff like that. That is something that that it's weird because my Britishness sits in direct contrast to that. And so I have this thing where I grew up around my mum and dad inviting people around and welcoming people in, and I've grown up to become the sort of person that doesn't want to interact with other human beings. So it sort of led to me giving people cake and tea, but being really pissed off about it. Basically, that's kind of how it's worked out.
I mean, England's slogan is "Nation of Warmth," right?
Yes,
it's legendary for its emotional intimacy. It's almost immediate emotional bond between people when they meet each other.
Oh yeah. It's incredible. It really is.
You alluded to the fact that your childhood had kind of a big economic schism in the middle of it.
Yeah.
What was that?
So my dad was like doing quite well, and we were sort of we were well off, and we were at private school and stuff like that. And then my dad he ended up leaving that company or being fired, and then he ended up just not being able to figure out a way out of the difficulties of. He didn't want to get a new job. He was thinking about getting a new job. He wanted to set up his own business. He sort of ended up dabbling in a few things that all went wrong. And so we ended up getting our house repossessed. And then at the same time as that, he ended up sort of he ended up being with another woman, sort of seeing another woman. And so my mum and dad's relationship sort of fell apart for a while.
How old were you?
I was about like 13, 12, 13, 14.
Did you have a relationship with your dad when that happened?
I did. Yes, I did. I mean, I was very close to my dad. I think sort of my mum and my brother are very similar, and I'm like my dad was, like personality-wise.
In what ways?
In terms of like, my mum and brother are very fiery and sort of, they give a lot in relationships but demand a lot as well. Whereas myself and my dad don't do anything and give very little but demand very little as well. So it's sort of complete polar opposites.
I feel like, and maybe this is me projecting from my own experience, but I feel like one of the ways that you can react in your personality and your kind of forming of self when you have that kind of emotional pain and inconsistency in especially in adolescence with your parents, is that distance that you describe, that you kind of protect yourself by saying, I will not wrong anyone, but at the same time, I will not take any risks.
Yeah.
Emotionally.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was just sort of, I just sort of became very disconnected from everything. So school, social life, just everything. I sort of, and my relationship with my parents suffered and stuff. So yeah, I think it's just a self-defense mechanism. You think, I'm just going to put a wall up around. But I'm describing typical teenage behaviour. So I don't know how much to attribute to circumstances or just general growing up.
But
by nature, aren't you?
It's also how you described your personality as an adult.
That's
just
true.
now
That
to
is
me.
true. That is true. That is true. Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that was more formative than I thought.
You ended up in like one of the most classic, responsible middle-class person jobs you could ever have in a million years, which is that you were teaching adolescents math.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Did you take that job? Did you fall backwards into that job, or was that a path that you chose because it felt like a responsible thing to do?
Well, I kind of had a situation. Well, my mum and dad were sort of desperate for me to do something lucrative, and like I'd done economics and maths at university, and so they wanted me to go. I guess my dad had visions of me going into investment banking and making a ton of money or whatever, and I didn't want to do that. And so I ended up just doing a couple of jobs before I got into teaching. I ended up doing just a couple of crap jobs. But the reason I ended up in teaching is because I'd always thought that would be a good thing to do. And I'd had a bad maths teacher when I was a kid. And so that'd give me, I remember thinking when I had that teacher, I'd love to be a maths teacher and be a good one that actually is like makes kids want to do maths. Because I remember
you're telling me that you went into the helping professions out of spite?
I think so, yeah. I think it was just anger what happened, but I didn't do that because I just sort of thought, maybe that's just a thing that I'm thinking. I don't really want to do that. But then ended up doing this job, like I was a cost analyst for an airline caterers. And basically what that is the airlines tell you what they want on the trays for their food, and I tell them how much it's going to cost for the whole fleet, right? So that job, as I described it to you, that was a lot more exciting than the job itself. That description that I just gave you.
And I literally just woke up from a brief nap that I took in the middle of that sentence.
But I remember like being at work one day and I was like tapping away at my computer, and then I just felt really depressed. And I went up to the toilet and I sat in one of the cubicles. This is really dark. And I just cried for a bit, right? And then I came out and I sat down at my desk. I felt amazing. And then from then on, like once a month, I reckon, at that job as a cost analyst, I'd go up to the toilet and have a little cry and then come downstairs. Then eventually I got to the point where I thought, this can't be the right job. So literally, I sort of came back from the toilet one day. I'd had my little sob. I felt better. And I thought, right, I'm going to do something. I phoned up the place and I got booked to start like a week later. And then I just immediately handed in my resignation. That's kind of how it worked. Weirdly, was enjoying teaching and then thought I'd always thought I'd just give stand-up comedy a go. Just give it a go and it'd be one of those things that I've tried and I can have a story at the next staff party or go, I'm going to try stand-up comedy for it. And so I did. I just booked in for a gig and I just I had no idea how difficult it was to do stand-up. You know, when you're first starting, I just thought I'd put a set together, write 10 minutes. You always think that when you start, I'd write 20 minutes, half an hour, or whatever, I'll go and do that. Anyway, I went and booked myself in for a gig. I lied to this club that I'd done a few gigs and they booked me on. And then I died on my arse spectacularly. Like it was awful, as most comedians do their first gig. And then, but I
have to correct you. I talked to a lot of comedians about their careers.
Yeah.
Usually they did spectacularly poorly on their second through 25th appearances.
Yeah,
usually I feel like it's a self-selecting group of people that are selected by the happenstance that they happened to get lucky their first time and they thought I could do this and gained false confidence.
That is true. That is the more common story, actually. You're right.
Let's hear some more comedy from my guest, Romesh Ranganathan. His new special is called Irrational. He recorded it in London at the Hammersmith Apollo Legendary Theatre. And in this clip, he's talking about his social media habits and specifically how he likes to use Facebook.
You know my favourite thing about Facebook, and your favourite thing as well, is when people you know hit rock bottom. I don't think I could go on anymore. Like. Sometimes I unlike it and like it again just so they get the notification. Do you know what I mean? Still watching!
Now that you have a TV show on in the UK on the BBC Three, and the first series or season of the show was you going to Sri Lanka, I imagine that also connected you with a world of British Sri Lankans who had ideas and expectations about you being a famous British Sri Lankan person.
Yeah. Well, actually, because what I was sort of nervous about was, as I sort of said to you earlier, like my experience was that I was less connected with my heritage than anybody else I knew or anybody I was at school with. So I felt like when we were making the show, I felt it was like very exposing because I was being completely honest about my level of ignorance. But there were lots of people that sort of said they related to it, and not just Sri Lankans, just children of immigrants of all cultures. And actually, the one thing I got was a lot of Jewish people telling me that they could relate to my relationship with my mum. Like they felt that mirrored their experiences completely.
Do people like your mom better than you?
Many people do, yes. Yeah, that is something I've had to contend with. It's difficult, isn't it? Because, you sort of, you don't want to be annoyed about that because it's your mum, but at the same time, it is a person that isn't you being funny.
Well, also, I mean, just you're mad that you have dedicated your life to something that apparently your mom just had to walk in front of the camera to...
I know, it is mad. And I do get a lot of people sort of getting in touch with me going, your mum's hilarious, and isn't it? And exactly what you said, isn't it funny that you have to work at it and your mum's just funny, you just put a camera on her.
So let's take a listen to a little bit of the show. It's called Asian Provocateur, and in this clip, your mom, Shanthi, has basically planned an entire day's worth of stuff for the two of you to do together before the trip starts, and you are not thrilled at the prospect.
What we should be doing, really, is not spending any time together to prepare ourselves, because we're going to have a massive dose of spending time together.
So you don't like to spend time with your mother?
No, I'm not saying that. We live in the same town. We see each other all the time. Why do you want me
to... No. I don't see you at all. Even to get hold of you over the phone, it's very difficult. I text you sometimes and I don't even get a reply for 2-3 days.
Mum, I'll tell you
what.
why.
But are you the Prime Minister of England?
So you have a podcast called Hip Hop Saved My Life, where
I do.
interview people about their relationships with hip hop.
Yes.
Both musicians and comedians and other folks. What was your relationship with hip hop?
I sort of started listening to it when I was about, I guess, 10 or 11 years old or something, and I think it was like Public Enemy. Well, I know it was Public Enemy I started listening to. Somebody left a tape at my house and I started listening to Public Enemy. And I loved it, but I did rap for a bit and get into all of those kind of things. So I was properly like, I remember like something KRS-One saying something about you live hip hop and you listen to rap music or whatever. And so that was me, like, I'm living the lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. So I properly threw myself into it, yeah.
I mean, I have an instrumental here. If you got some bars. You got some bars?
Mate, I don't have bars.
Yeah, you got bars.
I
I've
haven't
seen you
got
do it
bars.
on television. I've seen your verses on television. Drop the beat, Jesus.
I bring the butter, you know this ain't the margarine. I'm quick to clean up the scene like my name was MC Windowlean. I'm in your face like the mace up from the canister. My lyric brings the pain like testicles hitting on banisters. When you're skipping stairs, to battle this ain't fair. You're lyrically impaired, plus your knees are knocking cause you're scared. I'm reckless, I bring dominance to this hip-hop game. Look into your mirror frame, loudly proclaim my name 5 times, 5 lines. Come busting out your looking glass. Smoke will choke your throat like when you burnt that in cooking class. In the first year, your bubble gets burst here if you think you ain't outdone by the #1 from London.
Now we are talking. Now we have an NPR interview, Romesh. Make you spit.
Wow.
What's it like for you to hear other people's stories about their relationship with hip hop? I was listening to your episode with the very, very funny British comedy writer and producer Robert Popper,
Yes.
an occasional performer as well.
Yeah.
Robert, who was known as Bobby P on the program, which I enjoyed very much, was talking about this odd kind of, I would never have guessed it from knowing him a little bit in real life, but like the odd like emotional centrality of this in his life. And you must hear that from so many people that you wouldn't expect. But also, it was also, I know you're not quite 40, but it was 40-something-year-old dudes grumbling to each other was the other main theme.
Yeah, I sort of, I think that the episode that you name is one of the ones where it's really good because you get someone that people are not expecting to be so into it talking about it. And that's when it's really great. I mean, obviously it's great when we have rappers on, but, there are comedians who people, like, they'll come on and say they're into hip-hop and you go, I'm not surprised by that. And it's still entertaining and fun. But I think some of the best moments on that podcast are when it's like when you're talking to someone that nobody would have guessed. What I mean is, like, you get sort of lots of different things happen, and I'm sure you have this on this podcast where obviously you don't know what you're going to get from guests, but sometimes there's loads of hip hop talk, but it's not very funny and it's very sort of gets very in. Sometimes there's little to no hip hop chat, but you think it's funny enough to put out, and then every sort of degree in between, and you just sort of go with whatever you get from the guest. But I've had mates come on, a couple of mates have come on, comedians who it's become really apparent, like 2 minutes in, that they've blagged, they have got no idea really above and beyond the 2 artists that they sort of maybe Wikipedia'd before they came on. But it's still a fun it's still fun to have them on. But I think that it's at its best when you get someone unexpected sort of really talking about it knowledgeably, and you just wouldn't have guessed that they'd be that into it.
Well, Romesh Ranganathan, thank you so much for taking all this time to be on Bullseye. It was really great to meet you and get to talk to you.
You too. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Romesh Ranganathan, folks. That show at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles is Thursday, December 21st. Tickets are, I'm going to go ahead and say, still available, and he needs all the help he can get. You can also check out his podcast. It's called Hip Hop Saved My Life.